you have to get a subscription to ESPN Plus to be able to buy $80 pay-per-views.
Welcome to the Fighters Forecast.
Welcome back to the Fighters Forecast, everybody. This is episode 35. We are excited to bring you a pre-4th of July special edition episode here with no UFC event this weekend. Today's topic: is the pay-per-view model a bust in the UFC? Is it time to move on? So, as always with these kind of segments, we like to hit you guys with a little bit of a timeline type deal. So, let's get started. So, obviously the UFC was started in 1993, and that's when the pay-per-view model was introduced to the very first UFC event, UFC 1, on November 12th of that year. So, that was obviously an 8-man tournament. It was marketed heavily. It reportedly drew close to 80,000 buys. Obviously, different market. Everything was different back then. So let's move into the 2000s, the Zuffa era, which is obviously kind of how we're knowing things now. So that was the Fertitta brothers and Dana White bought the UFC in 2001. That's when they really pushed into pay-per-view model. They created the Ultimate Fighter reality TV show to try to boost, create star power, make the pay-per-view market explode. Think Chuck Liddell versus Randy Couture too. They're starting to get into the couple hundred thousands of pay-per-view buys here. So this is when it was really a big part of their revenue because they didn't have some massive streaming deal like they did now. So at this point, it was probably the primary revenue system, right? Then it's going to explode even more. You know what we're getting into here, the 2010s. This is when Brock Lesnar, GSP, Anderson Silva, Ronda Rousey was huge, and then, obviously, we all know who we're going to get to here, Conor McGregor. I mean, he exploded the market for the UFC. The biggest event in UFC history as far as pay-per-view buys is still UFC 229, Khabib versus McGregor, 2.4 million. And I mean, we'll talk about this more later, but I think Conor McGregor still holds at least 4 out of the 5 top 5 pay-per-view buy records there. And then, now we're at the ESPN Plus era, which started in 2019. This is kind of where this episode stems from. So 2019, ESPN Plus became the exclusive U.S. distributor of UFC pay-per-views. I think, is it BT Sport that does it in the UK?
I think it's TNT now that does it. I could be wrong.
So whoever else does it in the UK. This pretty much ended the kind of satellite cable pay-per-view model in the U.S. as far as for the UFC, because now that it is on streaming platforms, people in the United States have to buy it on ESPN, and the UFC gets a flat fee for just events. They just have to do a certain amount of events. So that's the timeline. Obviously, it's changed a lot. This episode kind of stems from reports from all over the sport, or all over the promotion, I should say, that pay-per-view buys are declining. And there's a lot of factors going into that. I have a couple that I could think of, star power, promotion, stuff like that. But we kind of want to talk about why this is. And this is especially relevant just considering the state of the new deal in 2026, the new streaming deal, and there's a lot of talks of moving away from the pay-per-view system. So that's the introduction to this episode. Please like and subscribe and share. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, all those platforms. We put everything out on YouTube, and my boy Drew here puts out even more awesome short form content. So check us out, follow all over there. And Drew, I've just been yapping for the past 4 minutes. What made you want to get into this topic? And, as fans of the sport that buy every single pay-per-view without fail, right? Without any other methods of getting streams, how do you feel about the pay-per-view model? Do you think it is, because really the only other sport that has it consistently is boxing, right? And it's kind of always had it. So do you think that, obviously I kind of went through how it brought the UFC into the big picture. It was clearly successful. Do you think that there's a reason that it's kind of fallen off? Or do you think that it is beneficial and the UFC should stick with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's multiple reasons. First off, before I start, I would love to tell Dana White that my favorite part of the year is spending $1,700
Oh my
to watch
God.
every single main event. That's my favorite thing to do. I love seeing the money leave my bank account. But I think there's multiple factors. I think the primary issue is access and how easy it is to pirate events. I mean, I'm not going to list websites, but they're not hard to find. And the
Easy
issue
to
is,
pirate, Drew? What do you mean easy?
we have Russian link, brother. Yeah, it's different from like the early 2000s where you were kind of in the middle of the dot-com boom and people kind of had like a distrust for piracy to some extent. Like, I know there was like some music streaming stuff where like you like pretty much had a coin toss of whether you're gonna like download a virus that blew up your computer or not. But now it's pretty mainstream. The websites like have pretty good websites. Their streaming's good. They don't really like buffer or anything. They're never taken down. I can count like one time where I think I've heard of a streaming website get taken down, and then it was literally back the next day. And like and it's transcended like UFC as well. Like they do pretty much all mainstream sports at this point. I think there's even like some that do like live TV of like every single channel that you could find, whatever. So I mean that's kind of the issue. It's just accessibility. Like when you compare it, and I think it's accessibility compared to the price. Like I think if like you said, where it was like if it was like $10 a month or $15 a month, and that was your in for the entire year, I think you'd have a lot more people buying it just because it's more convenient, and you take away that risk of, oh, the stream buffered right before the fight started or something, or the whole thing crashed because so many people are watching. Like I've seen a lot of jokes online of like people missing the Ilia Topuria Charles Oliveira fight right as the knockout happened and having that happen. So I think it's just an issue of accessibility. It's way too easy to pirate UFC streams, and it's gotten to the point where you have fighters like coming out and just saying, "Hey, stream the fight. It doesn't matter." I think Sean O'Malley said it in his build up to a Dvalishvili 2, where he said, "Yeah, y'all just pirate pirate the event. I know you're gonna do it. It's no big deal." And I think that's the primary issue, and it also becomes an issue in regards to the growth of the sport as well, because I think one issue with the UFC is that it's almost like a closed door sport in a way. It's like unless you really want to go and find a streaming service, like online, like a pirating streaming service, you're not going to be able to watch the main events, right? And that's kind of the stuff that, like, there's some fun prelims. Like, don't get me wrong, there's some fun prelims, there's some fun fight nights, but the bulk of the thing that kind of draws you to the sport lies in the main events. Like, think about if Adesanya Pereira 2 was on ESPN live and 5 million people were watching it and it was promoted in that way, imagine how many more recurring fans it would get in that regard. Whereas when I'm telling people about UFC, it almost like the knowledge gap is so large, and it just seems like for a lot of people it sounds like it's too much of a burden to try and get into UFC because obviously there's pay-per-view issues and different things like that.
Yeah, and it's like almost doubly inaccessible, right? Because it's not like we've talked about like subscriptions and how that would be good. It's like you have to get a subscription to ESPN Plus to be able to buy $80 pay-per-views. You know what I mean? Like it's not even just like it's like okay, I just go on this website, UFC website, and just buy it. No, you have to be paying the what is it like? I mean, it's not crazy, but it's like $8 a month or something like that for ESPN
Something like
Plus.
that.
And
You
then
you
you have
gotta pay,
to
you gotta pay a monthly subscription for the privilege
for the
of paying
privilege.
for UFC
Yeah, it's like, and then
pay-per-views.
half the times they advertise like get $5 off the next pay per view if you subscribe for a year. It's like okay, well half of us are already subscribed, and also like what? It's $80. But yeah, I was looking into this because in the intro I talked about BT Sport, and you were right. The UK has it is BT Sport, but it's now like you said TNT Sport, and I was looking at their model because I remember because I was in London for a while, and I remember hearing about how it's a different thing there because Americans always complain about the prices. It's like Americans complain about the UFC prices, and then non-Americans complain about like Brits complain about having to wake up at like 3 a.m. to watch a UFC fight. You know what I mean? So it's like, which one do
Yeah,
you want to struggle?
when I was there for Sean O'Malley versus
I
Cheetah
remember
Vera,
that.
it was a nightmare,
Yeah, I
like a
think I
literal night.
I did not stay up for that many pay-per-view events when I was over there just because like I just couldn't handle it. But my point was that they just have to pay a subscription for TNT Sport, and then they get pay-per-views and fight nights. So it's not like they have to do double trouble and then, like you said, spend $1,700 a year on fight nights, which, for a lot of people that's just not possible at all. And it's not like other sports are like accessible. Like the NFL, if you want to watch every game, you have to get Red Zone, and that's really expensive. But you can watch some games if you have you can watch some games if you have Amazon, whatever, blah blah blah. So my
I think
point,
I think that, I think the difference there is that like Red Zone is for like Red Zone is more like suitable for like fans or people that
yeah,
follow multiple different sports that are within certain regions.
yeah,
The thing with the NFL though is that they have prime time, right? They look at the metrics and they're like, all right, these are the four best football games that are going to be on today. We're going to show two of them at 12 p.m., one at 5, one at 8, right?
yeah,
So like you're getting the best of the product, and anything else that you pay is just full access to everything,
yeah,
essentially. Whereas the
yeah,
UFC model is flipped, where it's like, okay, you're going to pay a small amount of money to watch the watered down,
mm-hmm,
semi decent fights, but if you want to watch the good stuff, you're
yeah,
going to shell out $85 a month. And I think the primary issue becomes the price, because $85 is for one event is objectively a lot of money. Like
yeah,
I think if you sat down the vast majority of Americans and told them, hey, if you want to watch the Super Bowl, it's going to be $85. I don't think a high percentage of people are saying yes to that. I think it would probably be like 50% maybe at best. And that's for the Super Bowl. Like, that's going to be a relatively fun event to some extent. Whereas with the UFC, it's kind of a gamble. Like, you
yeah.
don't know. You don't know if you're going to get in a good event. You don't know if you're going to get a bad event. It's all a bit of a toss-up. So that also limits people paying and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll introduce this last question that I think kind of sets up the end of this with I think that I can understand why the UFC picked the pay-per-view model, right? Like in the eras when they started, the combat sports was not a household thing. It was publicly labeled as like barbaric, and it was boxing's dirty little brother. Like it
I
was
call it
it
like
was yeah,
cockfighting or
human
something like that.
cockfighting. Yeah, that was a quote on like Fox News or something. So I can understand why you'd have to do pay-per-view because you're not going to get a TV streaming deal, and you need to establish that. And so I can see how that would be hard to move away from when it is combat sports, right? Like every combat sport is pay-per-view for whatever reason. It is the sport that got pay-per-view model. Um, but I can also see now that you have this, at least in the US and around the world, but you have this established fan base that is not just like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it even in the past couple of years. I have friends that never cared about the UFC when I first got into it that now text me about a lot of events. And I had a buddy the other day that I had never heard have any interest in the UFC asking if I wanted to hang out and watch like the Usman Buckley fight night. You know what I mean? So that just shows me that like the UFC is past the casual audience, or sorry, past the hardcore only audience. Like you've reached the public now that you need to. So I think it's time for purely streaming. Um, and with the broadcast deal happening in 2026, and with Netflix purchasing the rights to WWE streaming for around $4 billion, and with TKO owning. Wait, what's the branch company? It is TKO that owns
Yeah,
WWE and
TKO owns
UFC.
WWE and UFC, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
so with TKO owning UFC and WWE, and WWE being on Netflix, I would love to see. I think my top two would be either Prime if they want to get kind of, well, I guess one championship was on Prime, so maybe not. So I would just say Netflix. I think if Netflix wants to make a splash into live sports, I think the UFC is right for the picking. And I think that would be really exciting to see weekly events on Netflix and move away from that model. So, Drew, if you were to pick, the perfect next destination for the UFC, thinking from a fan's perspective, but also thinking from a promoter's perspective, like what would you want from both sides? What do you think it would be?
I mean, I think the obvious answer here is Netflix, right? And I think the issue is that not only is Netflix a great option, but Netflix is already kind of has kind of gotten past this test phase of live streaming and live combat sports, right? Um, I mean, look at how well Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson did from just a pure viewership perspective, and depending on your perspective on that fight, like that's as much of a gimmick fight as you can really get, and that encapsulated such a large viewership. I think I could be completely wrong, but I think it was like ballpark of like tens of millions of views. I could be completely wrong, but I think the issue is that I think the best scenario would be to have it on ESPN. Like if you're the best option for like promotion of the sport and expanding it to getting more people would be to put it on ESPN, just be ESPN like on their live broadcasting channels. But I don't think that's very viable, and I just don't think that it would be very easy to get that on mainstream and primetime television. We've seen times where they will hold events like on ABC or on ESPN, but those are usually fight nights. And also they kind of have to like act differently during the fights and stuff. They can't really be themselves. I think Netflix is kind of like that middle ground where it's not $85 a month. You're not paying it, but at the same time, it's right in this middle ground where you can kind of like say or act however you want. Like you don't like change your personality to fit like this family friendly model. And it's very similar to what the WWE was at the time, because I I remember the WWE like early 2000s. It kind of had like that attitude era where they were just like doing whatever they wanted on TV, and like they were just acting stupid. And then at some point they moved to like, I think it was like TV, like whatever their term is for like younger audiences, like on TV. So they had to like, they couldn't swear, they couldn't like do a bunch of like outlandish stuff they'd been doing, and it kind of killed the brand a little bit, just because it kind of made it more corny in a sense. And then they moved back to Netflix, and they don't like, Netflix doesn't have any FCC regulations, at least in regards to their live streaming or like what they have on their own private broadcasting. So that gave them a lot more leeway. And if you look at their popularity, I think it's significantly increased. And I think that's the good thing about moving to Netflix, where the UFC wouldn't have to change themselves, but at the same time you have just as much, if not more, exposure in a more accessible region. And going back to what you said, like I have similar friends who will like message me about fights and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, this fight's happening. Yeah, I can't believe that happened. Like I had 2 or 3 people message me about Ilya Charles,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, did you see the fight? And they were like, no, I couldn't. I didn't feel like watching it. I was like, why not? He was like, I didn't want to pull up the stream or something like that. I remember as a kid, when I knew nothing about the UFC, when Conor McGregor knocked out Jose Aldo, that was on every single TV in my house. Like anytime you flipped a channel, they were talking about it. Like I just remember that resonating in my head and like remembering that for a very long time.
Yeah, well, I looked it up while you were talking there. 108 live average viewers for the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight. We're not saying that the UFC would get to that every time, but I mean, if you put a super fight on there and promote it right, I think you could get millions every event. So that would blow anything out of the water. And you know, I don't know. I'm not wishing for something like this, but even if they did like a Netflix subscription and then like pay $5 for a crazy pay-per-view, I don't know. I'm not saying they should do that, but like that would even be a lot better than what they have now, in my opinion. So yeah, this is an ongoing discussion. Obviously, 2026 is when this new deal is going to happen, so I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens then. But yeah, this was just a quick episode, guys, that we wanted to put out there with this, I guess, 2-week break between fights, right?
Yeah, what's July 12th, I think. Is the
Yeah, so
fight?
next
Yeah.
is that, yeah, that's like next weekend. Dang, what are our loyal Peruvian fans gonna do? Let me just so we got this weird email, not weird, it was a very nice email today that our last episode brought us to like 29th in the Peruvian combat sports podcast rankings on Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening and you're from Peru, we love you, and please keep listening. We're gonna have a complete rebrand and relaunch. So
We are going to be speaking Spanish in the next episode. We're both
dude,
learning
first it's
Spanish.
Mick Parkin, now we got to pick a lane, man. We can't.
Peru- New mythical fighter unlocked. Peruvian Nick Parkin.
we can't we can't pick where we are, but yeah, okay. I think that's it for today's episode 35. We're smoking through them this summer. I mean, I even during the school year, think about this, loyal audience. Think about this is what we're doing with when we're remote and don't have a nice studio. When we get back to the on campus and we can record in the studio, just wait for all the crazy stuff that's about to happen. So that's all I got to say. I'm Henry.
Drew.
And we are out. Thank you guys so much.